What's up, friends? Mike Rule coming to you live from the Loftus Studios, high above Highlands Bible Church, beautiful Vernon, New Jersey, Sussex County. Hope you're doing well today. Surviving the biting cold of northern New Jersey in February. The Mike Check podcast exists to strengthen the church to make a stronger defense of the faith by biblically checking the unbiblical. Today on the podcast, one of my closest friends, Dr. Ryan Michael Boys, fellow pastor, fellow co-laborer, going to be talking to us about his new book, How to Preach Apocalyptic, specifically the apocalyptic books of the Bible. A great conversation, and I can't wait to share it with you, so here it is. Dr. Ryan Boys, welcome to the Mike Check.
I am so glad to be here. Long-time listener, first-time guest.
You probably waited all day to say that.
Admittedly.
This is actually a dream come true. You know, I of course, starting this podcast, I wanted to have you on immediately, but I had to wait until the show reached a certain level of legitimacy and reach, really. And so I'm happy to announce neither of those things have happened.
I'm glad you said it.
But,
I wasn't going to say it.
But you're here anyway. For those of you listening who may not know anything about you, could you give us the thumbnail sketch of who you are, what you do you have a family, all that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. So I serve as the lead pastor at Green Pond Bible Chapel, which is in Rockaway, New Jersey.
I've heard of that.
We've been there almost 14 years now, so time flies. We have, my wife Lindsay and I have 4 children, ranging from the age of 18 down to 11, and we are living the dream.
I don't understand how any of that you just said is true. 14 years at Green Pond, and your oldest is 18. That makes me old.
You're very old.
We have a history together, of course. For those who don't know, Highlands Bible Church was planted by the fine folks at the Green Pond Bible Chapel. Many of us came from the Green Pond Bible Chapel, and you were instrumental. You were critical. You were foundational.
Well, we were there. I mean, I remember it happened.
Yeah.
So
we were all there.
I feel good about that.
It was literally like giving birth at times. And Green Pond still continues to be one of our closest spiritual allies. And of course, you're one of my closest friends. So thank you for all of that and more.
You're welcome. The feeling is very mutual.
But the reason you're here is because apparently in your spare time, you wrote a book. And the cover, I might add, is the best part of the book. So everybody, I need you to go to Amazon when you get to a computer or a phone and search How to Preach Apocalyptic by Ryan Boys, and you will see what appears to be Tom Selleck.
Tom Selleck is an angel. That's how it was pitched. And I felt good about it.
Why? How did you have any artistic direction in
Negative.
this cover, or
No.
you just kind of thumbs up, okay, here we go, FYI, or?
There are 5 books in the How to Preach series.
Okay.
So there's like an artistic jam for the consistency of each of the covers.
Oh, and it's a 1970s alpha male? Is that what you're...
All I'm saying is the first time I saw it, I thought it was supposed to be Jesus with a Tom Selleck mustache. And then when I figured out it was an angel, it made a lot more sense. Okay. And now though, it's grown on me quite a bit.
Yeah,
and I'm quite thankful for it.
It's got quite a personality of its own. But yeah, so your book, How to Preach Apocalyptic, actually part of a series, right? In the preaching series. And of course, knowing you as I do, preaching, one of your favorite things to do, as mine as well. Also, you as a preaching mentor to myself and many others. A lot of help that you have given me and others through your preaching. So you decided that you wanted to put this all down in a book. You wanted to actually make yourself an author in the area of apocalyptic. What is apocalyptic literature? What
Yeah,
give us the...
there's more to the story.
Okay.
Because that makes it sound like I wanted to do it, which I'm not sure I did, but it ended up happening. So when I did my doctorate at Gordon Conwell, the program was on preaching.
Was Southern busy at that time? Were they full?
Nobody
or-
else has this program.
Okay, all right.
It was called Preaching the Literary Forms of the Bible.
Okay.
So how the genre of the text of Scripture impacts the sermon.
Okay.
Awesome program. Jeffrey Arthur's kind of handcrafted it from the ground up, and it was an excellent course of study. I really enjoyed it. So my project was on apocalyptic because I was passionate to get better at preaching what I felt was one of the, if not the most difficult genre in the Bible.
Yeah.
So I did it. It was great. I was very pleased with it. Wonderful experience. Then afterwards, that led to me participating in the Evangelical Homiletics Society, which is a lot of teachers of preaching and practicing preachers who are interested in seeing the field of preaching as a discipline, as an academic discipline.
Yep.
Get better. And in that group, in that society, there was a subgroup for studying this topic, which Dr. Arthur's had cooked up. So he got a bunch of us together to join this study group, which was supposed to lead to a publishing project. But he needed somebody to do apocalyptic, and I was literally the only person that he knew that would fit it. So the first time he was taking me around the conference, he was introducing me to people, not by name, just this is the apocalypse guy.
Oh no!
It was great. It was the best. So. No, but we had a wonderful time with the study group over years, writing papers and reading them at the society and kind of developing the field of genre sensitive preaching.
Yeah,
and then by God's grace, it eventually did lead to a publishing project.
Yeah,
so there we were.
Yeah, so I mean, just even maybe backing up a step further, right? That whole idea of genre, maybe some people don't even realize that the Bible has different types of literature in them. And one of them, of course, what we're talking about is apocalyptic. So you don't preach apocalyptic the same way you would preach an Old Testament history book or a gospel or an epistle, a New Testament epistle. So what is apocalyptic that you would say?
Well, the apocalyptic genre, it's a subgenre of prophecy. So it's find it in the prophets, and it's marked by it's a first person vision report. So the prophet is taken on a visionary journey or given a vision. The prophet does that on behalf of the community and experiences these things, sees things. Very often, the prophet actually participates in the vision in some way, and then comes back home to the community, and then is expected to deliver the message of the vision and share it with the community. So it's often the visionary message is often mediated by the Lord or by an angel, and it's a thing. It's like you think in movies. When you think of genres, you can think of movies. It's like science fiction is a very defined genre. We know what it is, and westerns are a defined genre. Well, apocalyptic is a well-defined literary genre, and we've grown in our understanding of it as such, and so we just know a lot more about it now.
Yeah.
So it's really helped us, I think, in understanding it and then preaching it.
So then examples would be things, books like Ezekiel or Zechariah.
Ezekiel has 4 visions. Okay. So Zechariah has 8 visions. Basically, the whole book of Revelation is a vision plus the letters to the 7 churches. So, Isaiah probably has 1 apocalyptic vision in the throne room scene in Isaiah chapter 6. Daniel has his vision. So that's basically it. There's as a well-defined genre, you see the shared traits in all those different spots I just mentioned. And so I would encourage us to maybe try to be a little bit more precise in our language when we talk about apocalyptic literature is a subset of prophecy. Everything that a prophet writes is not apocalyptic.
Right.
It may, and even something that's written that has to do with eschatology is not necessarily apocalyptic.
Right. What kind of separates that out? So if it's a sub-genre within prophecy, what are some of the key things in apocalyptic that set it off as?
Yeah, the vision. So it's a visionary journey, and it's first-person report, and it's marked by, again, the mediating angel, or the Lord is the mediator.
Tom Selleck.
The prophet sees, experiences, and then shares that.
Yeah.
So,
And the language itself, of course, is
and it's marked,
very unique.
Yeah, marked by, well, think about it. It's a vision. So the visions have signs and symbols that stand for things.
Yep.
And highly figurative language is a big part of apocalyptic visions. So those signs and symbols, they stand for real things. They stand for a real life referent.
Right.
But it's not presented. This is the key thing I would say for anybody listening. It's apocalyptic visions are not security camera footage.
Okay.
So it's not like, oh, hey, this is literally what you're going to see or what's going to happen or what happened.
Right.
These are signs and symbols that tell the story in order to communicate something that's true. So something, that represents truth. It does represent something that's literally true, but it's not a one-to-one, correlation.
So it's not something that we should see these visions and try to make exact literal kind of, this is what this has to mean kind of thing in our present day. It's not, as the saying would go, newspaper eschatology kind of. You're not going to necessarily always have a one-to-one comparison with something exactly in your day.
Yeah, and I think I agree, and you want to just recognize that, like, for example, maybe a good example is the way Satan is depicted in Revelation chapter 12.
Yeah.
He's depicted as this dragon who's like ready to devour the Messiah.
Yeah.
And so, like, it's really scary. The whole thing is meant to convey the evil of Satan, his posture of constantly seeking to undermine the Messiah's work, right? All that. Nobody reads that and says, well, Satan is literally a dragon.
Right.
No, Satan is a fallen angel.
Right.
So he's not literally a dragon.
Right.
But he's presented in the vision in that way to communicate something about him.
Yep.
And so that's just a good example that it's not security camera footage of Satan as a dragon. It's Satan is depicted in that way for specific reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly where I am right now. The Sunday I'm preaching Revelation 13, the second beast, 11 through 18. So we're all up in the second beast.
The unholy trinity.
The unholy trinity, right?
Yeah.
The dragon, the first beast, and the second beast. And then, of course, 666. And
weren't you in a band that was called the Unholy Trinity? I was trying to remember.
Yeah, that was in the 90s. Yeah, it was grunge. It was good. No. So why do you think there's so much misunderstanding when it comes to this? Because I don't think I'm going to be shocking you or anyone else. Should we open up YouTube and say, type in 666, what does the mark of the beast mean? You're going to get some really crazy videos there. Why do you think there's so much misunderstanding in this genre particularly?
I think there's two things at play. The primary factor is the neglect or misunderstanding of the genre itself. So people don't recognize it's a specific genre of biblical literature. And therefore, as a specific genre, it comes with specific rules for interpretation and expectation of what are we going to find.
Yep.
So most people haven't been taught that. And therefore, I think they are not as well equipped to then navigate it. So everybody knows how to deal with an epistle. Everybody knows how to deal with a gospel. We even know fairly well how to deal with a psalm, and a proverb. But when it comes to apocalyptic visions, we're like, the wheels come off, And
I think that's too lack of, I would say experience, but lack of, just studying it or preaching it. Like, do people just typically like, I'm not going in the back of the book there?
I think the average Christian, I think it's just a level of specificity that they haven't.
Yeah.
Unless they're really reading a study Bible carefully, they're just not going to, they probably haven't been exposed to that kind of language.
Yeah.
Although there are some resources that do work to try to do that. Particularly, Gordon Fee has, How to Read the Bible Book by Book, Fee and Stewart. And that book, again, it's genre sensitive.
Okay.
Or they also have How to Read the Bible for All It's Worth.
Okay. That one I've heard of.
Yeah, which is like, it introduces you to that concept. And a decent study Bible should, keep you, keyed in on that. So all that to say, we definitely have grown in our understanding of the genre you know, basically they got really serious about it in the 80s. And then that scholarly work has now finally starting to trickle down.
Okay.
The second reason, though, I think people misunderstand it is also because when it comes to things that are related to the end, we have this temptation, I think, to try and shoehorn everything we read into the system that we've been taught.
Yeah.
And I just don't think that's a great
Or maybe
way.
not even taught. It's just in the air that we breathe, right?
Yeah. So, I don't think that's a healthy interpretive approach. Nobody wants to do that. I don't think anybody's thinking, no, let's just make it fit.
Yeah.
But we're just inclined. If we've been taught a system and we've bought into it, we're thinking, okay, then we got to make this work.
Yep.
And so I think that has led to maybe some weirdness.
Yeah.
Now, the genre itself is weird.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So you get
I'm
some
halfway
weird
through
stuff.
Revelation. It's weird.
Yeah, I mean, well, and Zechariah, you've got the lady in a basket being carried away. Like, what is that all about? And a flying scroll knocks down a house. Like, oh yeah, like, oh, this makes perfect sense. You know, so there's a lot of bizarre images in Apocalyptic. So that obviously that it also lends to wacky interpretations.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just my own Christian walk, like I probably a decade of walking with Christ before really maybe even seriously like, okay, what is this about? But before I did that, like, of course, the air that I breathed was all, Left Behind series or something else where it's like it just kind of seeps into your presumption there.
Yeah, and that's that's your default setting. If that's your default setting, then you're gonna come at it in a particular way.
Yeah. So is this book then an effort towards fixing that, bridging that gap, would you say? Or is this more towards equipping guys like me and you to?
The primary audience for the book are preachers. So I would think most guys that have read it are already pretty aware of genre distinction.
Yep.
I think what I've tried to do here, what the series is designed to do, is combine these are the hermeneutic principles for the genre, and then how does that lead to then homiletic strategies?
Yeah.
So each chapter is basically half and half. Like here's a feature of the genre, and then how does this affect how you might preach it?
Yeah.
And so I do think it'll help, and I do encourage preachers to kind of take a step back from their eschatological system and let the text be the text and let it say what it's saying. And
well, you do a great job in the book of being fair to different eschatological perspectives, right? It's not just, you don't come at it with that forceful, like, this is what this means, I'm a preterist or I'm a whatever it is. You say, well, if you're a preterist, you might believe this. If you're a futurist, if you're an idealist, like you give that varying perspective where you do hold it open-handed. I think that's one of the strengths of the book is it doesn't because you can't.
Well, the funny thing is, if you're really letting the text drive, sometimes, and I think in most cases, your eschatological position doesn't change the main point of a passage.
Yep. Right.
So, like the two witnesses is a good example in Revelation 11. Like you've got your dispensational view of takes the two witnesses are Elijah and Moses or whoever, and
two real people who will come in the future.
Two real people going to show up, be these prophetic voices. And then you've got the a more symbolic view where it says, well, maybe the two witnesses stand for the believers in the Old Testament era and believers in the New Testament era and all that throughout history. But either way, the function of that chapter for the original readers and for us is to prepare us to endure persecution by faithful witness.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter. I mean, it doesn't change the main point. It's not that it doesn't matter, but it's just if it's Elijah and Moses, fine.
Yeah.
If it's Old and New Testament believers, fine.
Right.
It's meant to
That's not the point.
Yeah, it's meant to equip us now. And so, I think I have a couple of examples like that where I'm just trying to say, the system shouldn't be driving the sermon. You want the text to drive it.
Absolutely. So. Yeah. And that being said, right, the three rules of biblical interpretation: context, context, and context, right? Sometimes we can get lost in context in the apocalyptic kind of forest. Is context still important? Because usually when people think the context, they think like, oh, we're in 1 Kings and we're talking about the downfall of Solomon and how that happens and who's this. Is context still important in the midst of such a symbolic text?
100%. All of the Old Testament apocalyptic visions occur in larger prophetic works. So all of Ezekiel is not apocalyptic visions. There are 4 visions.
Yeah.
Interestingly, Ezekiel's visions, 2 come at the beginning and then 2 at the end. And so, more or less kind of bookending a little bit the work. So you gotta take that into account as you're working through those visions. Zechariah starts with the visions. Daniel has visions along the way. So, you want to recognize these visions contribute to the overall message of those prophetic works. In the New Testament, you're just talking about Revelation. There's a debate about whether or not you take Revelation as a whole as just apocalyptic or if there's a subgenre thing going on.
Yeah.
And honestly, either way, wherever you land on it, most of Revelation is an apocalyptic vision. You still couple it with the message, the 7 letters to the 7 churches. Right. And you're still getting, an overall coherent, message. Yeah. But that Revelation is a little different because it's like 97% of it is apocalyptic vision, whereas in the Old Testament, you're just getting parts of the book. So you have to ask, how does this contribute to Ezekiel? How does it contribute to Zechariah? What was the circumstances of the original readers? And why does this vision help them, at that moment?
And I think if you don't ask those questions, especially the last one you said, the original audience, what was going on and whatever, first century Greco-Roman Empire for Revelation, like, okay, if you lose that, you kind of lose your mooring, and then you kind of could go anywhere with it.
Yeah. So then the wheels have come off as far as anything goes. You can make it say anything you want to.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't stop and ask, okay, well, this was written in a specific time to specific people, what would they think? That'll keep us grounded. Yeah. Why do you think people don't realize the heavy symbolism? Or is there either they over-realize it and they just focus on it?
Yeah, I think I would say I know for sure that historically the argument was binary in this way. You either take the Bible literally or you don't. Yeah. Like it's an all or nothing proposition.
Yeah, I love that question. Do you take the Bible literally?
Yeah.
Where it's literal.
Yeah. Well, the way it was the way it was explained to me that was very helpful was Kevin Van Hooser said, the Bible is literally true in its literary sense.
Oh, I like that.
And so, yes, we believe the Bible is literally true, right? But it is a book of genres. And so based on the genre, certain things in the Bible, nobody takes literally because it's obvious what the genre is. Right. So especially in poetry, for example. So in the poetry of the Psalms, you have this poetic language and metaphor and simile that are used to describe God's character. And nobody's going to insist on, we limit God to being a shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. Oh, God is, literally a shepherd. Well, no, that's not the point. The point is that God cares for us in the way that a shepherd cares for sheep, so on and so forth. We get that because we're more familiar with poetry. Yeah. But is it literally true that God is my shepherd? Kind of. Yes, it's literally true in its literary sense. Yeah. So when it comes to the apocalyptic visions, I think you had this idea that they had to be literally true, like security camera footage. And then, so I think that's been a real barrier. And so embracing now the argument though was if they're not literally true, this is where like kind of the dispensational argument comes in. If it's not literally true, then it can mean anything, and there's no guardrails, and we're just going to play fast and loose with the Word of God. Right. And so, it was all or nothing. Right. That was the argument. Right. And then you had, I think, in fairness to them, I think you had some amillennial interpreters who did that, who really just it didn't have to be literally true, so they were just kind
of okay, let's go
running here, there, and the other way. So it's like, whoa. So what's different about the genre, introducing genre into the equation, is the genre does put limits on it. Yep. So genre and context tell us we are not saying you can interpret anything in the Bible as a vision. Yeah. It's just these are the visions. So we treat them as visions and we interpret them as a vision should be interpreted. And so that's where we're expecting the symbolism. We're expecting figurative use of language, symbolic numbers, things like that. So And that's not saying that it's not literally true. It's just literally true in its literary sense.
Right, right. And going back to context, right? You also say in the book that, what's the context in the book? What's the context in, the greater, whether it's New Testament, what's the context in the whole canon, right? New Testament and Old Testament. And one of the things that's been kind of blowing my mind as preaching through Revelation and really been helpful for people here at Highlands is they're blown away by the Old Testament references that are pulled into the New Testament. Going back to the beast, you have the first beast, which is just a combination of what Daniel saw in the four beasts. And it's like, I never knew that before. It's like, well, you have to, that helps us to ground it as well, the larger context of all things.
Yeah.
So you really can't just go off anywhere if there's another reference in the Old Testament to something that's pretty clear that'll give you some guardrails.
Yeah, the canonical sense, right?
Yeah.
So now, obviously people can respectfully disagree about how to correlate some of those.
Sure.
So Ezekiel's last vision of this glorious temple and the restored land.
Yeah.
There's some spectacularly different takes on that. If it's but that's fine. But we're still saying we want to correlate that with the rest of Scripture. And see how it fits in the overall story.
Yeah. Yeah. Speaking of the overall story, that was quite a segue, right? One could say that the whole Bible broken up into four acts, right? Creation, fall, redemption, restoration kind of thing. What contribution would you say is some of the more important contributions maybe of apocalyptic literature to the big story of the Bible? What things can we hang our hat on?
A couple of things come to mind. One is several of the Old Testament apocalyptic visions give explanation for why Israel is in exile or what they can expect God to do in the long run while they're experiencing exile. And for example, Ezekiel's second vision, he sees the glory of the Lord depart the temple because you have this idolatry that's in the vision. It's happening in the very temple, and the whole thing is really offensive. It's just totally scandalous. Right, and so, Ezekiel's in exile, but he travels to Jerusalem in the vision. He sees this heresy going on. The glory of the Lord departs the temple. Who cares? Why does that matter? Well, it matters because it helps Israel interpret, why are we in exile? Where has sin left us?
Yeah.
And what's going on?
Yeah.
And they're going to get word that the temple's destroyed. Why is the temple destroyed? Because of this idolatry.
Yeah.
So that's more of a helping us understand kind of the brokenness of at least in that context of why Israel ends up in exile. So I think that prepares us to live in this era of redemption happening, but we have to understand what is idolatry, what is
the
how
already
does sin
not
work.
yet kind of thing.
Yep. And then but because of the nature of those circumstances, very often apocalyptic visions then focus on the glorious future.
Yeah.
And so those visions we all love because they give us a little taste of what's coming. Whether in two main tracks, one is judgment of the wicked, where God makes wrongs right.
Yeah.
So apocalyptic visions are big on that.
Yeah.
And God's glorious future with his people.
Yeah.
So both of those things, when you're down and out and you're struggling, those are two good visions to have.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially judgment, because sometimes we think of these things and judgment is like, nobody, I don't want to think about judgment. I'm not really sure what's going to happen. But you make the point in the book that evil, it shows us that evil gets away with nothing.
Right.
Like there will be a day of reckoning. And so for everyone who has been taken advantage of, whatever, has something, whether that's, presence of sin in the world, I have this disease I can't get rid of, like there will be a day where all of that will be made right.
Well, and in a culture, every culture values justice one way or another.
Yeah.
We live in a very turbulent time when it comes to thinking about justice, but what people are really reaching for, they'll never get from the courts, and they're never going to get it from our legal system or our political system.
Yeah.
They're only going to find that ultimate satisfaction of justness in the reign of God on the earth.
Yeah.
And that's what some of those visions picture. And we need that vision to get us through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of the end of the story, right? That is going to make all things right, that we can, now I can persevere in this because I know that Christ is coming and he will make all things right. And I will have that glorious inheritance. Yeah. Motivation for us Strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, the song says.
Don't make me sing it.
You also say in your book, because I did read your book, I don't want to be that host who doesn't read the book. Plus, I'm already preaching through Revelation, so I'm like, hey.
You and my mom both read it. That's awesome.
I know a couple other guys that read it. In the book, you identify many reasons why the apocalyptic benefits both us as individuals and the church, right? And sometimes we can think like it's it's this weird genre that we can study and we can be edified. Can we be? What are some of those benefits, both individually and the church, you think are some of your favorites from apocalyptic literature genre?
I really like that what we were just talking about, the posture towards justice, the ultimate righting of all wrongs, evil is dealt with.
Yeah.
The function of that part of apocalyptic visions is meant to provide comfort when we're suffering. So that I love, because everybody experiences failures of justice. Like we all have seen it one way or another, and things don't go right, and people get away with stuff.
Yeah.
And it's whether it's the guy cutting you off on the freeway, or whether it's the guy that cheats at work, or whether it's the corrupt politician, or the judge that doesn't render the right verdict.
Yeah.
So in all of those instances, there is comfort knowing that there will be a good resolution.
Yeah.
And I think that that's a big one for me, the comfort in the midst of the angst of I'm not seeing justice right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I also think a primary function of the genre in general is to foster perseverance. So it does prepare God's people to get knocked around a little bit.
Yeah.
And especially Revelation. I mean, the book of Revelation is designed to equip the church to endure all this drama.
Yeah.
And I just think that we all need that. We all need that preparation to cling to the Lord and to walk by faith through very difficult circumstances.
Yeah.
The last one is to foster worship. There's so much worship in apocalyptic visions, which is right and good.
The throne room, like you were saying. And
multiple visions of the throne room.
Yep.
So Isaiah 6, Ezekiel 1-3, and Revelation, you get throne room. So why do we need that? Well, we need that because in the midst of all the stuff going down, we need this vision of God. And Ezekiel is really interesting because Ezekiel, he's in exile, the nation's in exile, and he sees God on a mobile throne. Everybody freaks out about the wheels, wheels within wheels, or the spheres.
Yeah.
It's actually beautiful. In the vision, God's throne has wheels. Why? Because God's sovereign everywhere. So his throne is mobile. It's not limited to Israel. That's the whole point. It's not limited to Israel. They're in Babylon. That's what God's still sovereign.
Yeah.
So that little piece of the puzzle is wow, that's a really powerful visual to communicate something very significant and to foster worship.
Even in this situation, whatever I'm going through, God is still sovereign. Still on his throne.
His throne has wheels.
His throne has wheels. If you were in Sussex County, you'd probably have a lift on there. But
maybe.
Anyway. Yeah.
His throne has four-wheel drive. Whatever. I mean, however you need to get there.
Yeah. And the church, of course, rallying together, right? In Revelation, right? The whole background of that is the church, endure. He's coming. You see the martyrs who are how much longer? And no, I will make it right. And that is encouraging us as the church. We can over-individualize things. And I think one of the things your book does well is that it brings it back to the church and saying it's for us as Christians, not just Ryan and Mike in their individual walks with Christ, although it is that too.
Yeah, I was greatly helped by Pastor Ken Langley, who's now retired. He's a professor of homiletics for many years. He was the editor for How to Preach Apocalyptic, and he really helped me kind of brainstorm some of those more corporate applications. It was very helpful because you're right. Our default setting is individualistic in Western culture. So it was nice to be able to kind of massage the corporate side a little bit and apply it that way. But he was very helpful in that.
And that's so encouraging and unifying for us as the church as we go. Because a lot of these things, especially we see them in culture, they are assaults on the church. No, we believe this, and society as a whole is coming against that. So we're all looking forward to that day where justice will be here. Why do you think, we'll pick on us preachers for a minute, why do you think so many of us preachers shy away from preaching? I will just interject that the walls of the law office have heard me say, whose idea was this? Like so many times as I'm in the middle of Revelation. Why do you think we shy away from?
The visions are weird.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah.
And so, and because sometimes it's not obvious what they mean, there's a hesitance, like, to go there and have to stake out a position.
Yeah.
I also think it can be complicated. Some people that are really into eschatology and they've got 17 charts and they can, go deep on you, like that kind of might scare some preachers off because they don't want to have to deal with certainly don't want to be putting charts up on a Sunday morning and, this, that, or the other. But some people may expect that and may want that. So
some people love that.
Yeah. So that's another reason. I mean, it's a hard genre. So now that being said, I actually think it's a wonderful genre because it's so vivid.
Yeah.
Like nobody's forgetting these. I mean, if you really walk through them, they're so vivid. And so they awaken the imagination of the listener.
Yeah.
Nobody's falling asleep.
Yep.
In these visions, as far as picturing what's going on, and then to walk them helpfully to appropriate application. Now they can run with it. Now they've got a reason to remember.
Yeah.
Satan as a dragon, or the scroll knocking the house down, or the throne of God with the wheels, or whatever whatever it is.
Yeah, yeah. It is a challenge for sure. To work through all of that material. And it's something that could be overwhelming at times. And there's so much controversy surrounding some of those things, so much misunderstanding. Yeah, you're right. It's not always easy, shall we say. But Mother said there would be days like this, right? When we talk about, you and I are expositional preachers, as I would hope that most of our listeners would know what that means. In the sense that we expose the meaning of the text. There is a meaning that the author intended, and so hopefully the meaning of our sermon would be the meaning of the text, right, in its context. How does preaching a apocalyptic text, per se, relate to expositional preaching? Do you think it is helpful? Do most preachers not preach expositionally? Like maybe that's another reason why you don't get into it?
Yeah.
What do you think the relationship is between apocalyptic and expositional?
Most of the time, if you're committed to preaching through books of the Bible, as many are, then you're saying we're going to go through Revelation, so be it.
Yep.
Get ready. You're going to do apocalyptic.
Yep.
So whether you want to or not. You could do, I'm only going to do the letters to the 7 churches and basically wuss out. But, I
thought about that.
Yeah. If you're preaching Zechariah, shorter minor prophet, like not a huge, chunk to bite off of and chew, but you're going to deal with apocalyptic visions. So it's just Daniel, especially, like people, they love Daniel, but then you got to deal with the visions. Yeah. So it's just part of it. So if you're preaching expositionally, you're going to have to deal with it, and rightly so. I think it helps the church. That's why I like exposition, because you have to preach hard texts. You have to preach difficult concepts.
Can't skip the hard stuff.
The other option is, if guys are doing thematic series, like a topical exegetical series, and you might say, I'm going to do the visions of Daniel or the visions of Ezekiel or whatever, which that's a little harder because you got to keep track of the message of Daniel and the message of Ezekiel, which is more than just the visions. So there's a challenge in that. And I think it was Gordon Fee that was like, don't drag and drop people into the visions because they're just too hard. Like you got to set it up with kind of that systematic exposition, and that way they'll be equipped to understand it. If you drop somebody in one of his Ezekiel or Zechariah's visions, like last week we did Psalm 23, this week we're doing, this, it's like, it's just a lot. Wheels. It's a lot to ask of the preacher and of the hearers. Not that it can't be done. It's just, there's a lot of extra lifting at the beginning with introducing what's going on.
Yeah. I mean, there was one quote, right? do not preach Revelation apart from a series in your book. I don't think it was your quote. I think
That was
you were
Gordon
quoting.
Fee,
Oh, was
yeah.
it?
Yeah.
And that idea, I couldn't even imagine that because of all the setup that I would have to do if I was not preaching through it, the whole thing. Because like it seems like every week I'm going to be like, okay, we've seen the beast, and where else have we seen the beast, and what does this mean? And
But you've also set people up because you've been explaining how the genre works.
yep,
So you're not re-explaining everything about it every week.
yep,
But they're used to it by then.
yeah,
So that gives you an advantage because now you're actually buying time in the sermon for application
right,
that you don't have to give to orientation to the genre.
right,
So that I think there's something to be said for that. And his point wasn't don't ever do it. His point was it's just hard to do it the other way.
yeah,
So he was just making that a big deal that it's just really hard to drag and drop people in the middle of these visions.
yeah. Maybe putting on your preacher hat for a minute, taking off your author hat for a minute, putting on your preacher hat. When you are preaching through an apocalyptic text, how do you handle the different frameworks of interpretation? Do you say, well, I'll let you answer that, but how do you give more weight to another? Do you try to explain them all? Do you take a stand?
So I think I did make a point in there. I think it's important to educate the church on eschatology.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think a sermon should be a summary of eschatological positions.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, I just think
It's not a lecture in that sense.
no,
Yeah.
exactly. So, but sometimes you do have to just kind of come clean and say, okay, listen, here's the deal. There's 2 or 3 ways to take this,
Yeah.
and I'm going to spend more time explaining the view that I think is right and helpful.
Yep.
In a gracious way, hopefully, not running down these other positions, but maybe just explaining that. And by the way, that's not only relevant to apocalyptic visions. Really, any passage of scripture that deals with eschatology or has some connection to the end times, it's helpful to do that. So that's fresh in my mind because I just preached. I'm in the middle of Matthew 24. And Matthew 24
doozy.
is spectacularly difficult for people to correlate into the other kind of facets of eschatology in the New Testament. So, but I just said, here's why there are 3 different ways to take chapter 24.
Yeah.
And I just I named the groups.
Yep.
And then I said, this is why I think this view is the best view. And this is how I come at it. And so, but it took maybe 3 minutes.
Right.
It wasn't a big deal.
So you don't camp on that.
And people that really are passionate about it, they can ask you follow-up questions.
Yeah.
But rather than pretend like it's not a thing and just like ignore the other views, I mean, that's just not very helpful. This next week, I'm continuing in Matthew 24, and I get to deal with the 2 guys walking in a field. One's taken away, 2 women sitting at the
mill.
The mill. So I'm gonna talk about the way certain people are gonna take that to be referring to a secret rapture, and then talk about why that view is not accurate. I don't think, but nonetheless, so because people are gonna be thinking it,
Exactly.
so like I need to explain it,
yeah.
but also at the same time not rob the sermon of its
Yeah.
of its purpose
Yeah.
of fanning the flame of faith and
Yeah.
leading people to Christ and
that's a difficult needle to thread sometimes, how to spend enough time on it so that people feel like, okay, I have a little bit of a grasp on this, that makes sense, and not get waylaid into rabbit holes where it does turn into a lecture and charts and all of that, and then you lose the application. And
as complicated as it is, though, the different views aren't that it's not that hard to orient yourself, first of all,
right,
as a preacher. Like, just do the work. It's yes, systematic theologies are long, but the part you're looking for is probably only 3 to 5 pages. That's going to deal with this issue. So just read it and try to wrap your mind around it.
Yeah.
You're going to interact with it in the commentaries anyway.
Yep.
So if you can do a little bit of heavy lifting on that, then you can help your people along.
Yeah.
And they can learn. People can grow in their knowledge of it.
Yeah.
I had somebody said to me last week, Pastor Ryan, I disagree with you on eschatology, but we're good because we agree on the things that matter.
There you go.
And I thought, well, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Failure to convince them of my view.
Yeah.
but maybe it was a win because we're able to charitably disagree on that. And
Yeah,
still
and just exactly
value the
what you said,
gospel.
like, that's not our job, right? Our job is not to convince someone of our interpretation of it, right? Our job is to lay out the Word of God and apply it, and hopefully the Holy Spirit will do the work of impressing that truth upon someone's heart. But yeah, that's a win. If somebody said that to you, I would say. Maybe just kind of as we land the plane here, put yourself in the shoes of someone who's doing their yearly Bible read, because Pastor Mike and Pastor Ryan say you should read through your whole Bible. And so, they're in the midst of it, and they get to an Ezekiel, and they get to the visions in Daniel, and maybe towards the end of the year in December, they get to Revelation. How would you encourage them as kind of the ultimate layman who's maybe never read those passages before? Any words of wisdom to guide them through the forest?
Yeah, a couple things. I would say the first is it's really helpful to be talking to people about what you're reading.
Okay.
So reading it's one thing, reading it and getting something out of it is another thing. And that tends to be more of a group project. So I would probably just either, like, it might catch you off guard. You might not realize, there's all these visions in Zechariah. Like, what am I doing here?
What am I reading?
So at that point, you have the opportunity to just get a little help in conversation with some other believers. So you got somebody in your care group, somebody at church, even a pastor, like, just, hey, I'm reading Zechariah. Any tips, for this? And maybe that'll help. A good study Bible will have usually some orientation for the visions.
It's funny you say that. I can't tell you how many times I recommend a study Bible, because people, they're like, I don't know what I'm reading. I'm like, do you have a study Bible? And they're like, what's that?
Yeah.
It's like,
it does help. It makes a big difference.
Yeah, get a study Bible for sure.
Yeah, and we're not getting a cut of any of those sales, just so everybody
we're
knows.
definitely not.
But so I think talking to someone about what you're reading, and then I think the other thing is keep an eye on the message of the whole book. So don't get lost in the vision to the point that you forget the whole thing. So Daniel especially is a good example of that, where you've really got good clarity on Daniel and the beginning of this process of being in exile and staying firm in the faith and clinging to the Lord no matter what the culture is pushing you to do.
Yeah.
And that is very clear.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you get into the visions, and it's easy to just forget what you've just read. And all of a sudden you're lost in this vision, and then King of the North, the King of the South, and next thing you know, you're done, and you're like, what just happened?
Yeah.
And so I think just kind of keeping the whole book in view, which is helpful. Honestly, in most apocalyptic visions, the mediating angel, or the Lord, explains the things that you really need to understand.
Yeah.
So it's kind of nice, because there's a few that are like really tough, but for the most part, the mediating angel's like, this is this, and it just explains it. So then you're like, oh, okay, that helps me, and at least you can kind of go from there and try to make appropriate application.
Yeah, those are little puzzle pieces that fall into place.
Yeah, you'll see sin described in vivid ways to help us grow in our disgust for sin. You'll see God's glory put on display, because we need to be reminded of God's glory.
Amen.
You'll see those judgment scenes where the wicked will be judged, and you'll see the glorious future that we have with the Lord depicted in ways that are meant to encourage and inspire us.
Yeah.
So if you kind of have your expectations set for that, you'll be fine. You'll make it through. And the visions are not like, it's not like reading in the law, where you really can get bogged down in like just the amount of material, where we're just kind of going through law after law after law, which is important and valuable. And but that's a lot of, the visions are like exciting. There's stuff going down, but you're like, what is happening? So I think it's more about maybe before and after is just how do you handle it? Like, prepare before a little bit, and then talk to somebody after, and in talking about what you're reading, you'll be blessed as you seek to apply it.
Yeah. Amen. It just goes to show us and reinforce that all of God's word has been inspired by him, and it's written for our edification and our growth and for his glory. So
even the apocalyptic visions.
Well, yeah, so I would imagine that if anybody wanted to purchase this, if they are of the preaching persuasion and they would like to learn more about how to preach, or perhaps they're a layman, so to speak, and they're leading a Bible study on something, There'll definitely be some good tips in here. Where can they get this book here?
Yep, 2 places you can get it on Amazon, which I think
I've heard of that.
It's a bookseller at some point.
Yep.
Yeah. And the other is from Fontes Press, which is the publisher.
Okay.
So either way, you can get it. I would say that several folks have read it who are not pastors, are not Bible scholars, are not professors. They're just lay people in churches. And their comments were it helped them to better understand the genre and to better know how to receive the preaching of that genre.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very accessible. It's very well written and it's an easier read. It's not something where you're going to be bogged down in technical language and all of that. So
it's great for birthdays. It's great for Mother's Day. If you're struggling with teenagers.
What is the next holiday we have? Oh, we just missed Valentine's Day.
If you missed it, though, this is a good makeup. So sorry I missed it. Here you go.
Highly recommended. Well, Dr. Boyce, thank you so much for joining us on the Mic Check. I appreciate you being here very, very much. And we should have you back sometime.
You know I love you, Mike. This is the best. So thanks for having me.
All right. No problem. Well, I hope you found this episode helpful today. Dr. Boyce in the house. I'll drop the link to purchase his book on Amazon in the show notes. If you'd like to know more about the Mic Check podcast, you can go to our website, themiccheckpodcast.com. We're also on all the socials. If you want to know more about Highlands Bible Church, you can also go to highlandsbiblechurch.org. But the best way to get to know us is to come worship with us on a Sunday morning, the Lord's Day, at 9:30 a.m. Thank you once again for joining us. Until next time, keep checking the unbiblical with the biblical, and we will see you again on the Mic Check.